Take my time. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. And Shabbat Shalom to people who are joining us online. We are broadcasting it and people are joining us, which is very moving. And I know that Anna feels the support which we are all sending her way, and to all the people in Israel who are doing so much as they can. Anna, thank you. So I won't interrupt the conversation between Anna and Rabbi Splansky. I'll welcome you all from my heart. I'm so moved to see you all here, my friends at Holy Blossom Temple, and my temple standing together to listen to Anna. So I'll tell you about Anna, with whom we at Holy Blossom have a special connection, a surprising connection, which only a few people in this room know. Anna was a founder of Kihilat HaShachar, with which our synagogue is twinned. So who knew that the journey from Kihilat HaShachar to here would be so eventful, and it's delightful to have you here for that reason too. Anna became the CEO of the Israel Reform Movement following our congregational friend Rabbi Gilad Kariv's election to the Knesset in 2021. Previously, Anna had served the IMPJ as Deputy Director General in charge of congregational development, youth, education, and young adults, basically all of the movement's activities in Israel. During her time in this position, Anna oversaw what was truly dynamic growth of the Israel Reform Movement, during which in the decade between 2012 and 2022, the IMPJ more than doubled its congregational presence from 23 to 54 congregations. Kol hakavod. And now Anna is leading the IMPJ at what could not be a more challenging time. Anna, please tell us everything, but I hope you are also finding this challenge fulfilling and meaningful and even inspiring, as the Reformed Jews and others around the world are standing behind you. Thank you for coming here.
And thank you, Joan Garson, for your leadership, and thanks to you and David Baskin for sponsoring this gathering tonight. I think our teenagers from Holy Blossom who are spending March break in Israel exactly now are spending Shabbat with our sister congregation in Modi'in. And Shabbat morning, they'll be at Hebrew Union College, the beautiful campus in Jerusalem. And I think earlier in the week, they met up with some of the teens from Kilat HaShachar.
They were supposed to.
Oh.
Next time.
Okay. Well, thank you for being here. I imagine every time you leave Israel, you leave a piece of your heart there, but especially now. So really, truly, thank you for coming to be with us when your work is calling you there. I'm going to ask a few broad questions, and then there will be time for questions to come from the congregation. So Anna, first, please tell us, what do you think are the most important things for us to know right now? What are the most pressing matters? What are your greatest concerns?
Thank you. And let me open just with saying thank you for hosting this event and for being here. And as Joan mentioned before, it's really strengthening the fact that you're here. The most pressing concern right now is how we can try and stop the reforms, the judicial reforms that are at this moment the government of Israel is trying to pass through before April 2nd. This is when the Knesset is going on its break. So this is something that is concerning all of the Israeli society and many people from the civil society. The reform movement, the Israeli reform movement, is part of the general civil society in Israel. But when we think of the particular things that are concerning our movement in general, is the fact that the Supreme Court of Israel we always felt that we were able and we were protected by the Supreme Court of Israel. And if you think of our achievements, of the Israeli reform movement achievements throughout the year, many of our achievements were happening thanks to the Supreme Court. If we're talking, for instance, about the fact that our conversions are recognized by the state of Israel, the reform and conservative conversions that are performed not just outside of Israel, but in Israel, it thanks to the verdict of the Supreme Court. And now we're converting about 10% of all conversions in Israel. So that's just one very relevant example. If we're talking about the fact, Joan mentioned before, the fact that we were able to more than double our congregations from 25 to 54. So out of the new 27 new congregations, 13 congregations are in regional municipalities in Israel where the rabbis' salaries are actually funded by the Israeli state. And the reason is because the court basically made the state fund non-Orthodox rabbis in rural municipalities. This is not the case in towns and in cities, but at least in regional municipalities, our rabbis are able to serve kibbutzim and moshavim in the periphery of Israel, where again the state is participating in paying for those congregations. And that was thanks to the precedent of winning the Miri Gold case in 2012. So, and these are just two examples of why we're so concerned, because once the Supreme Court is not as strong as it used to be, we won't necessarily be able to achieve achievements like we had. And the government can basically override any of the Supreme Court's decisions. So when we go to the rally, when our movement is going to, and the people in our congregations are attending the rallies, we are concerned as citizens of Israel that care about Israeli democracy, but we're also concerned about the thriving of our movement, because I think the last 10 years, since I got back, actually, so I started working for the IMPJ, for the Israeli Reform Movement, right after I finished a shlichut of 4 years here to North America. I was the central shlichut to the Union for Reform Judaism. And when I came back, Rabbi Gilad Kariv hired me as director of congregations. And we were smaller then, but with the vision of our board then, and with the vision of Gilad, and with the fact and the belief that the basic system in Israel of the court can protect us, we were able to thrive, including getting more and more funding from the state of Israel. Most of the NGOs in Israel, if you look at their budgets, then about 80 to 90% of their budget is coming through the state. We were able to get to a point where about 15% of our budget is coming through the state of Israel, but now this is being jeopardized because at any time, if the Israeli government will be able to pass the override clause, then they'll be able to override any court decision, no matter if this is a new decision or a decision that was, or a win that we had in the past. So this is really something that we're concerned about, and that's why we're doing everything we can in order to fight against it. And that means mobilizing the people in our congregations, going to Tel Aviv, to Kaplan, to Haifa, to Jerusalem, rallying and raising up our voices, and also coming here and telling the story to you so that you can be a big voice within the Canadian Jewish community, saying that this is something that you're concerned about. You're concerned about the Israeli democracy, and we need you with us. So
We're going to get to us, but we want to stay with our Israeli brothers and sisters for a moment. It must be very validating for you to stand with hundreds of thousands of Israelis now publicly in the streets, because each of those examples that you gave of the hard wins were hard won. And the Israeli Reform Movement has been working on these matters for decades now, with a small staff and a small budget, and nevertheless earning these big wins. So I understand that the Israeli Reform Movement is made the decision to officially support the demonstrations. Can you tell us a little bit about that decision? Was it easy to make? Was it hard to make?
thank you, Yael, and Joan is smiling because Joan was in Israel about a few weeks ago with us, and we were standing together in Kaplan, and actually hearing Rabbi Jacobs speak to more than 150,000 Israelis about the care of Jews in the diaspora. So, but it wasn't what seemed natural now that we're rallying, and all of our many of our rabbis are leading Havdalah services right before the official rally begins, and our people from different congregations are gathering in all these spaces, carrying signs that say, without the Supreme Court, there's no equality. We believe in Jewish and democratic Israel. That wasn't that natural towards the end of December, when the coalition finally formed, and we looked at all the coalition agreements, and not just with the work that they decided to do with the judicial reform, but also if you look at the coalition agreements, the grandchild clause saying that they wanna move this so that a person that has one Jewish grandparent won't be able to make aliyah to Israel and become an Israeli citizen anymore. The decision to create a national conversion law, which means that if you create a national conversion law that is only recognized by the Rabbanut, by the ultra-Orthodox establishment, that would mean, what would that mean for people who were converted through the Reform movement or through the conservative movement, about giving more power to the Rabbanut, to the ultra-Orthodox establishment, by giving them decision-making on civil matters that have to do with things that were dealt with at the court. So all of that, including the override clause, including all the judicial reforms, made us, within the small group of our leadership, understand that we have to fight that. Now, how do you convey that to the rest of the people? Once we saw the coalition agreements, a few days later, there was a demonstration. The first demonstration was during the time the Knesset was sworn. The Knesset, the new government was sworn to the Knesset. And we decided at that point to join the demonstrations, but that was a top-down decision, and we got a lot of backlash from the people in our congregation and from the leadership in the field, because they said, how come a new government is sworn? We had right-wing governments before, we had Likud governments before. We never demonstrated against the government. What changed? So we were there, our leadership were there, but many of our people were not still there, because they said, we don't understand what's different. Why are we doing this? Once the movement is taking a stance, it's also a risk. We're putting ourselves out there politically. And people were saying, well, what if someone stands next to you and they're holding a flag, a Palestinian flag, or something related to the occupation, and we don't necessarily have a stance on that. We have people in our congregations that voted for Likud and right-wing government. We have people in our congregations that vote to the left. So is it already a political statement? And we started conversations with members, with people in our congregations and with our rabbis. And one of the things that we realized is that everything that you do in Israel as a member of a reform congregation, or if you're a leader of a congregation, is already political. If you're a woman wearing a talit, leading services in a congregation, you're already making a political statement. So we can't run away from it. And also we can't allow ourselves to be purists at this point, because as I mentioned before, the changes that this government is trying to have are directly connected to the thriving and the well-being of our movement. So after having all these conversations, our board finally voted again for us to join the demonstration. And we actually found ourselves as the only religious Jewish organization, as an organization protesting at the rally. There were many organizations from the civil society for human rights, but we were the only religious organization.
I think that deserves an applause. Anna, you mentioned the reform and conservative conversions that are at risk. And I want the community to know that locally, it's not only us. I once had an informal meeting with some Orthodox rabbis in town, and I asked them how many rabbis from the entire Toronto Jewish community are recognized, their conversions are recognized by the chief rabbinate in Israel. Does anyone want to guess how many? One. So what is being threatened is the totality of the Jewish people. We use the expression Klal Yisrael and peoplehood and Am Echad, and that is really being threatened in a serious way now. So I just want to call attention to that it's not only our concern. So I hope everyone here knows that the North American Reform Movement, the URJ, Union for Reform Judaism, has an emergency campaign on now to support the IMPJ, the Israeli Movement for Progressive Judaism, and also to support the IRAC, the Israel Religious Action Center. So Anna, first, please tell us a little bit about the work of IRAC, and also please tell us why this campaign is so important.
Thank you, Yael. So IRAC, the Israel Religious Action Center, is the legal and public arm of the Israeli reform movement. So they're working as part of the reform movement, but they're also working towards a more just society in general, so that if the conservative movement needs to be represented at court or on other public matters, they're also representing the conservative movement, doing the work on behalf of the conservative movement, or if there's discrimination against women in the public sphere, for instance, in the town of Bet Shemesh, or there's a segregation on on buses in Israel, which is illegal, but it's still happening. So people usually come to Iraq and they take them to court, or they fight for it. And as I mentioned before, many of the achievements of Iraq at court paved the way to the success of Jewish pluralistic movements in Israel, and especially our movement. So as we move forward, looking at all the things that are under attack right now, both IMPJ and Iraq, we realized that we need to do more work on the public sphere in Israel, educating the Israeli public on some of the work around religion and state that we were doing, and about pluralistic Judaism in general. And in order to do that, we need more funds. If we want to have a big public campaign on the media, on the national media, in the social media, and on other arenas, we're right now thinking of shooting many videos, including, for instance, a film about the conversion. And we would need funding for that. And also, as I mentioned before, about 14% of the IMPJ's budget is coming from the government. And so if if for some reason the government would decide to stop funding us because of the override clause, because they might make a decision that they're not recognizing non-Orthodox rabbis in regional municipalities anymore, then that would mean losing substantial funding. Our education program, we have a very successful school twinning programs where we match schools in the diaspora and schools in Israel. And this program is funded by the government of Israel and by the Ministry of Education, and recognized by the Ministry of Education. And now they are making changes with the Ministry of Education. They're breaking it to pieces and giving it to other ministers. So the piece that the part that we got funding through is now under Orit Struk. Orit Struk is a minister from the Religious Zionist Party, from Otzma Yehudit. She's pretty extreme. She can make a decision like that to stop this funding for the reform movement. And there are other programs that we're getting funding from the government, and we're afraid that this might also go away. So we're preparing to get funds to substitute, because we don't want to cut on any of our programs just because now this is the government, where you have the Likud party and 4 other Orthodox extreme parties. So all of our programs, the Jewish pluralistic programs, are under threat right now.
So immediately after Shabbat, you can find your way to the link on Holy Blossom's website to make your contribution to this emergency campaign. Right at the very top of our website, there's a new hub called Lean Into Israel. And there's all kinds of great material there. I encourage everyone to check it out, including the link to make that contribution thanks to Arts of Canada leadership, the Reform Zionist movement of Canada. We are able to do that through with Canadian funds. So my final question before we open it up is, beyond tzedakah, what more can we do? A Canadian Zionist congregation like ours, what more can we do as a congregation? What more can we do as individuals?
Thank you. Thank you for this question. So I want to take you back to my memories and Joan's from 2 weeks ago when we were together. So we were there holding a Havdalah. The regular people, attendees from the IMPJ and the rally. And we were joined by a delegation of rabbis from the CCAR. We were all marching together, and we were holding signs both in Hebrew and in English, keep Israel Jewish and democratic. And it was really empowering and encouraging to see how you care about us, about our movement, and about Israel. I say you, even though you physically, Yael, weren't there, and many of you weren't there, but we felt that you were represented through that particular voice, and it meant a lot. And then we were listening to speeches, and every Shabbat there are speakers at these demonstrations, renowned authors, politicians, people that have, a lot of recognition within the Israeli society. And then they invited Rabbi Jacobs to speak. So think about it. He was there speaking in Hebrew in front of 150,000 Israelis, saying, we care about you. He said, Atem anachnu nitzavim hayom. We're here standing with you. We're usually, when we demonstrate because Israel is in trouble. We're here standing with you because we feel that Israel is in trouble and the Israeli democracy is in trouble. And it strengthened, obviously, our movement and the people from our movement, but it got so much support from the crowds. And actually, after that, it was covered by the Israeli media. Wow, diaspora Jews care about what's going on. Maybe they can really help us through raising your voices. And actually, a week later, in the Israeli media, on the national television, there was a big piece about, thanks to that speech, there was a big piece about how diaspora Jews care and are concerned about what's going on in Israel. And it has an effect. It has an effect on our politicians. Whenever there's a government official coming to, whether it was Smotrich speaking at the Bonds gathering, whether it's someone else coming here and meeting you as our representative, rallying and saying, this is unacceptable. This is not something that we're gonna just let you do in silence. It strengthens, and it's another crack. And when you have more cracks, then you can get the light in, right? As your Canadian poet, Leonard Cohen used to Alav Shalom, Zichrono Livracha. Yes, so one thing you can do is raise your voices. I'm going to be, so I just heard it's something new. There's a rally at Nathan Phillips Square, and I was asked to speak there. It was actually important for them to hear an Israeli voice saying that we appreciate the fact that you diaspora Jews and Israelis here raising up their voices. So, so I think it's important. I think that once you raise up your voice, and it doesn't mean that you're against Israel, you're for Israel, but you're for a Jewish and democratic Israel. So something like that is important. Coming to Israel, not canceling your plans to go to Israel, but actually coming to Israel, spending time with us, with our congregations, whether it's on Shabbat, whether it's on other occasions, is really meaningful for us. It means you care, and it gives us more fuel and more strength to continue fighting.
And when is that gathering at Nathan Phillips Square?
Sunday, 4:00.
Okay. Okay. We have time for a couple of questions before we go upstairs for Kabbalat Shabbat. I would like to ask a question of Anna. While you're thinking, I'll call attention to our newsletter that just went out to the congregation an hour or two ago, included the stories of fellow congregants, Michael Cole, who was in Beersheba with 3 generations of his family at the demonstrations there, and also our congregants, Dr. Rhonda Wolanski and Israel Ben Ishai, were also at the demonstrations in Jerusalem, so you can look for their firsthand accounts, and they are representing us there. As our president, Phyllis Denenberg, was with Women of the Wall at last Rosh Chodesh. So we are doing our very best whenever someone is there to represent not only the reform movement of the diaspora, but specifically Holy Blossom Temple. Questions? Yes, Joan.
What are other organized Jewish communities doing? We live in Toronto. What is happening in the US, in Canada, in England?
Thank you for this question. So Joan was asking what are other communities around the world are doing. So first of all, I know that there are many people from congregations that are participating in rallies that are happening here. There's a rally in New York. Orly, my colleague Orly Eroslechovsky and Gilad Kariv are going to be speaking there. So that's one thing. We had a demonstration in London where Rabbi Deborah Blaustein spoke from Finchley Reform Temple. She was one of the speakers there, and every time something like that happens, it gets coverage in the Israeli media, and thank God the Israeli media is still free. So it has a lot of power, and it gives us again a lot of strength. Of course, they are all also aware of our emergency campaign, so they're doing their best to help and raise funds regarding that. And many people, other things that they're doing, there's much work that is being also done with on the political level. If you have leverage with politicians in general, in the Canadian administration and in the U.S., there's a lot of work being done with the administration there. I'm very, I'm very honest. It really depends where, but I know that there's been work done, at least in the U.S., with several federations. That is a collaboration between our congregations and the federations. I know that the New York Federation wrote a letter. The head of the Federation of New York wrote a letter expressing concern, and this letter went to the government, to Bibi Netanyahu. So that's, any other example, I'm happy to give more examples of how people are raising their voices. There was a letter campaign that Iraq ran. I'm happy to send it if you want to, and you can still write letters to your government officials, encouraging them to raise their voices regarding what is going on in Israel. And so that's on one level. On another level, I want to say that our movement right now is thinking of producing signs both in English and Hebrew to congregations. Some of our congregations put up big signs saying, we will protect Israeli democracy. So, or defend, I'm not sure of the right translation, but we can come up with the right translation here. You can put on a sign like that. Our congregation, they hung up Megillat Ha'atzmaut. So the Declaration of Independence, much of the values that we're fighting for are actually written in the Declaration of Independence. And if you look at the demonstrations in Israel, we're holding the symbols. Many people are holding the Declaration of Independence picture. They're holding the Israeli flag. So now we're distributing within our congregations the Declaration of Independence, and they're actually hanging it next to Aron HaKodesh. So we're happy to provide that to you, and maybe this is something that you can do also as part of Israel at 75. There used to be a time where the Israeli Declaration of Independence was never was like the basic foundation of the state of Israel, and now we're feeling that it's being undermined. So that's another thing, and we're going to come up very soon with a resource packet for Yom Ha'atzmaut for Israel 75. So we're going to be sending it out to many of the organizations and congregations around the world. We'll be happy if you use it. Especially the Shabbat that we're actually celebrating, the Israel 75th, would not be Yom Ha'atzmaut. We have our own celebrations on Yom Ha'atzmaut as well, but there's a special Shabbat between Yom HaShoah and Yom Ha'atzmaut that we call Shabbat Tkuma, the Shabbat of restoration. This is around the special 8-9 days of the national thought about Israel. And so if you want to celebrate Shabbat Tkuma, we're going to be happy to do that, to think of doing something together. So that's also, I think, thinking about our movement, thinking about Israel at that time is important also on the educational level.
Thank you. One final question from Mark Anshin, and then we'll make our way for Shabbat.
So we assume that the demonstrations, the advocacy that's being undertaken is the objective of that is to prevent the government from adopting these, I wouldn't even use the word reforms, proposals. So, but thus far, doesn't seem to be moving the needle of all this coalition government. And today, Prime Minister Netanyahu in response to President Herzog's proposal, rejection, he's not going to have anything to do with it. My question is, what's the end game? What's going to happen if you can't change the government's view or change certain members of the Knesset so they don't vote for these proposals? If you change 4 or 5 votes, that would do it. But in the absence of doing that, so far they're on a pretty straight line to adopt these proposals. And it seems to me, going back to the long-term objective would be to make sure that the center-left part of Israeli society coalesces for the next election. It doesn't allow us to
What Mark says is so important. I think we're not going to be able to answer it in full now, but please, the final word, Anna, for a minute or two, and then we'll make our way upstairs.
Thank you. So toda rabba. Obviously, I have a long answer to you, Mark, and maybe on the way up, I can give it to you. I think that there's still some time to try and do whatever we can and protest before we decide on the next steps. And obviously, it's a big concern. And as I said, if we're thinking about the month of Nisan and Pesach is right around the corner, the fact that we're going to celebrate freedom. And when you sing Atikva, you say, Liot am chofshi be'artzenu. So being free in our own land means that at least my hope for Chodesh Nisan, for the month of Nisan, is to feel that we're free. And so my final message to you is to say thank you. Keep us on your minds. Try to support us. There are so many ways, not just financially, but also in terms of showing up to Israel programs, showing up to the rally tomorrow on Sunday, for instance, and just speaking to your friends and relatives in Israel, giving them strength, making sure you speak to other people here in the Canadian community, in the Canadian Jewish community, making sure that people understand our stories. Important. Toda rabba.
The room is filled with many leaders from the Canadian Reform Zionist movement, and to conclude, one of them is Les Rothschild.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, Rabbi. Anna, thank you so much for coming to Toronto and coming to Holy Blossom. I think it's very important for us to understand and to hear from Israelis what is really happening on the ground. And I think I speak for most of us, or all of us here, that we are so inspired by your leadership and by the on-the-ground things that are happening in Israel with the IMPJ that are making a difference. That decision to go political has made us very proud. And so thank you for that.
Okay, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We'll see you on the second floor. You can get there either by way of the spiral staircase or the elevator.
Just want to tell everybody.